The Well Beneath Ashwood, Chapter 1. The Well's First Rope. Ashwood kept its water in 3 places: the creek behind the mill, the public pump beside the alder tree, and the old well in the square with an iron lid that no one touched. The iron lid was not part of our daily lives. It was part of our weather. You noticed it the way you notice a stone your cartwheels go around each market day. It had rings for hands that were not meant to use them. It had a seam you could fit a knife into if you were the sort who wanted to try your luck. The seam was greased black once each spring by hands that did not want to be thanked. My mother had a card pinned on the inside of our pantry door. 3 rules in a faded blue hand. Do not draw from the well when the creek runs. Do not show the water your face. If a bucket rises heavy and silent, send it back. She said her mother taught her those rules. Her mother said the same. No one remembered when the rules began. No one asked who wrote the first card. Rules keep their own birthdays in places like this. That summer the creek shrank and the pump coughed. The mill wheel turned slow and then stopped. Dust stood in the road like a person who wanted to come inside. Men took their hats off to the sky and put them back on again with nothing to show for it. The alder tree dropped yellow leaves in July and stood there like a bare arm with no hand. The sheep chewed pebbles. Children sucked on pins for spit. On the 4th day without a cloud, I woke before light and walked to the square. The iron lid looked colder than the air. A dog had slept beside it and left a dark oval on the stone. The dog lifted its head when it heard my step and laid it down again, as if to say, "We are not doing that. We are not even thinking about doing that." I sat on the lip of the square and read the card in my head. Do not draw from the well when the creek runs. The creek did not run. It did not even lie. It was a bed of gray stones that looked like shoulder bones in old cloth. Do not show the water your face. The lid was closed. The water had no eye here. If a bucket rises heavy and silent, send it back. I did not have a bucket with me. I did not have a rope, either. I had the thought you get when you count rules like coins and find one missing. By noon the council took the lid off. They did it with iron hooks and gloves they had carried in a basket for years. They did it in the open. They did it slow. No one cheered. No one spoke the last second before the metal came clear. The smell that rose out was not rot and not sweet. It was the smell that stone keeps under its tongue for 100 years. It was the smell a cellar gives back when you take the last jar from the shelf. It was the first cold smell we had had in a month. We stood around and tried not to look into the dark. We looked at each other instead. You can tell a lot about a town by how it looks away. Ashwood looked away carefully. We kept the black circle of the well in our sight, the way you keep the corner of a letter you do not want to read yet. Old Rusk brought a coil of new rope from his shed. The rope had chalk on it to keep it from sticking to itself. It left white on his hands and white on the rim where he threw the first loop around the ring. A bucket came from the smokehouse. Thick oak staves bound with iron. The bucket felt proud of itself. It had never touched that water. You could tell by the way it stood on the stone and refused to tip toward the hole. We did not ask who would lower it. We did not say the names of men who should or women who should not. Rusk tied a bowline around the bucket handle and a running hitch lowered down like a belt. He set the bucket on the mouth and looked up. The sun hurt his eyes. He closed one and left the other open for the dark. "Say the rules," he said. We said them. Do not draw from the well when the creek runs. Do not show the water your face. If a bucket rises heavy and silent, send it back. Rusk nodded to the boy beside him. The boy set the crank. We used the old windlass with its teeth still sharp. The axle creaked once and then settled. The rope paid out with a soft rub against the ashwood. It sounded like someone whispering in another room on the first thin night of autumn. No one leaned over. No one put a chin on knuckles and looked for the first wet shine. We watched the rope go down. We watched the chalk marks disappear. We felt the temperature change and then change again. At 40 arms the rope went slack a little and then taut. We heard the bucket kiss the water. Not splash, not glug. A soft, polite sound, like a cup set on a saucer by a person who knows how to keep a kitchen quiet. Rusk waited. He always waited. People said he had patience because he had never married. I think he had patience because he knew what rope can do when it is in a hurry. He put his palm on the rope and felt it with the heel of his hand. His thumb lifted as if someone had pinched it from the other end. He nodded once and said lift. We turned the crank. The rope came up with weight. It came up with the kind of pull that makes your back wake and your teeth think about themselves. It was not too heavy. It did not stick. The windlass sang a little at the edge of its voice. When the bucket reached the lip, we turned it into the light and stood back without learning to. Water stood in the bucket like a column of glass. It did not move with the movement of the bucket. It did not ruffle when the rope shook. Rusk set his fingers on the handle, and the handle was cold. He let go. He looked at the surface, and then looked away quickly like a man who has seen his own reflection in a window and decided he does not want to greet it. Cups, he said. His voice had splinters in it. We had brought tin cups and ladles and jars. We put them on the stone, and the stone took their heat and gave them nothing back. Rusk dipped the ladle, the way a person baptizes a child they are not sure about. The surface broke and did not break. The ladle came up heavy, as if it had been asked a question it could not answer in front of strangers. He handed the ladle to the older woman because she had the oldest hands. She held it and did not drink. The water leaned toward her mouth and held there like a sentence that stops before the last word. She tipped the ladle into a jar instead. The jar fogged at once, not steam, cold. The fog crawled down the outside of the glass and lay on the stone in a ring like a wreath at the wrong time of year. We did not speak. We did not make a sound of approval or fear. We have manners in Ashwood. We keep them when the wind changes and when the wind forgets us. Rusk lowered the bucket again and brought it back again and did that 5 times. By the 5th bucket our breath showed in the sun as if it were autumn inside the circle, while the hills burned brown a hand's width away. He ladled for the old first, then for the sick, then for the women with milk gone tight in their chests. The water made lines on the inside of the cups, as if it had passed a finger around before it left. No one drank while standing near the well. They carried their cups to the shade of the alder, and sat with their backs to the circle like people at a table who have been asked to face the door for safety. I carried a jar for my mother. I felt the weight of it in my elbows and in my jaw. My teeth hurt the way metal hurts when you chew on winter. The jar touched my hip as I walked and left a cold that bled through cloth to skin. My mother did not drink at once. She set the jar on the shelf near the card with the rules. She put her palm to the glass, and then to her forehead, and then to the jar again, as if she were comparing them for a game. She said all right, and poured a little into a cup the color of old coins. She held the cup beneath her nose, and closed her eyes and breathed. "What does it smell like?" I said. "Paper," she said. "Wet paper put to dry on a line, and stone, and night." She took a small mouth and closed her lips around it like a promise. Her throat moved. She set the cup down and put her hand on the table and held the table the way you hold a person who has told you news you cannot answer yet. I waited. The waiting felt long, though it was not longer than a kettle. Then she opened her eyes, and they were wet and not with water. "It went everywhere," she said. "It went to my fingers and my back, and to the thin place under my tongue where I keep my first fear. It found the fear and put a hand on it, and the fear went to sleep. It is not gone. It is asleep like a winter bait." She looked at the cup again, as if it had moved. She pushed it away, the way you push a plate when you have eaten enough, and do not trust your hand to say no twice. "You will drink," she said. But she did not say it like a command. She said it like a woman setting a bowl outside for a cat and hoping the cat is too proud to come close. "I will wait," I said. The word later rose to my mouth, and I did not use it. I thought of the tower story the traveling mason told once, and I chose different words, and gave that tower nothing. We kept the jar on the shelf, and filled 2 more. By dusk, the square had a wet ring like a coin mark around the mouth of the well. The iron lid lay on its side against the altar, as if it were a person who had eaten too much at a wedding and was waiting to balance. Children slept that night without asking. Dogs moved twice and then stopped, as if a hand had been laid on their heads. The mill wheel turned without water and clicked once when it reached the high place. The click went down the creek bed like a word that has forgotten its meaning and remembers the shape of its mouth only. In the morning we lifted the lid again and found prints on the inside. Not hands, not feet. Rings would not have fit them. Shoes would not have suited them. They were 4 little question marks arranged in a square, and then another, and then another, going down the stones of the wall as far as we could see. Rusk spat and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "It will be rules today," he said. He was right. Rules arrive like rain in places that have wells. The older woman brought the old iron from the church porch. We burnt it clean in a driftwood fire and set it on the stones to cool. Then with a nail and a hammer, she put 3 lines into it, in the old way. You could read the words with your thumb with your eyes shut. You could read them when smoke lay across the square, or when night came early. Do not draw from the well when the creek runs. Do not show the water your face. If the bucket rises heavy and silent, send it back. She lifted the plate with tongs and carried it to the mouth of the well. She set it there like bread. We stood back and waited for the plate to smoke, or salt, or grow wet. It did none of those. It sat and showed its dull letters to the dark. After noon, the first trouble came. A man from across the ridge brought his own bucket. It was polished and had his family mark burned into the handle. He set it down like a traveler sets down his own cup in his own house. Rusk told him we draw by turns, and we draw with the town bucket. The man looked past Rusk's shoulder into the mouth and smiled once with 4 of his teeth. He said the creek on his side had gone to sand, and he had 3 children and a woman with dry lips. Then he said he would mind the rules, and asked to see them again. Rusk read them slow. The man nodded and put his hands in his pockets and rocked heel to toe. He said those are good rules and the mark of careful people. He said careful people can be trusted. He said trust is a rope. Then he leaned over the mouth of the well and smiled into the dark. Do not show the water your face, the alderwoman said. He turned his head as if a midge had touched his ear. He did not step back. He bent further, and the dark came up to meet him, the way a glass comes up to meet a mouth. Rusk grabbed the back of his belt and pulled. The man's smile came away from the circle like a hand from a stove. His breath came fast and made sound against his teeth. He said he had only wanted to see if the water in Ashwood was as fine as people said. He said he had not meant to break a rule when people were good enough to share their bucket with a man from across the ridge. He said many things that were not needed. That is the way with people who have learned how to talk their way out of stables and into kitchens. Rusk gave him the rope to hold. The man took it, and the chalk came away on his hands. He looked pleased with the white. He looked at his palms the way boys look at chalked hopscotch while they wait for their turn to jump. Rusk lowered the bucket himself and brought it up himself and poured it into jars that did not belong to the man. He gave those jars to our old and to our sick, and 2 people whose hands did not tremble when they reached. The man waited and smiled at other men with teeth that still numbered 4 and at women with lips that still had the idea of wet in them. He did not get his turn that day. He slept on the ridge that night, with dust in his mouth and no dream to carry him. I carried another jar home for my mother. On the way, I stopped at the edge of the creek bed because the mill wheel had clicked again. There was no wind and no water and no hand on it. The wheel turned a quarter and stopped. It turned a quarter back. It clicked and waited. The waiting had weight. On the stones below the wheel, someone had laid 3 pebbles in a row, and then 3 below, and then 3 below that. 3 threes. A child could have done it. A child had done it, because the middle row had a gap where a small hand had slipped. In the gap, a white chalk line had rubbed itself into the dry stone, as if a rope had passed there in the dark, had not been careful. I did not move the pebbles. I am not the sort who sets a table right when someone else has set it wrong in the night. I looked at my face in the glass of the jar instead. My face was there, and then not. Not the way reflections go when you tip. There, then not. Like a person stepping behind a post while walking toward you. At home, my mother had set 3 cups on the table for no reason she could say. She poured from the jar into each, and then added a spoon of boiled milk to mine, and to hers, and to the 3rd. She set the 3rd cup in the corner, where no one sits. She put her hand on the table, so her fingers almost touched the cup, and pulled her hand back again, in case it wanted to take her hand with it. We ate dry bread and drank wet. The water sat in our bellies like a guest who had carried his own chair into the room. We said little. Words come slow when water has found the thin place under your tongue and put its cool there. We slept early. We dreamed not at all, or so we told each other. Before dawn, I woke to a sound. It was not a splash. It was not a knock. It was a rope sound. A rope paying out, under careful hands and careful breath. I went to the square in my shirt, with my feet inside my boots, without socks. The stone was cold. The cold lived in the stone, and had moved into it while we slept. The iron lid was off. The rope was down. The windless teeth were quiet. The bucket rose heavy and silent. I crossed the stone and put my hand to the rim and felt air from the dark touch, my palm like a cat deciding if it will bite. I looked for the person holding the rope. No one held it. The rope moved on the drum by itself. The crank turned in a tidy way like a clerk who wants to get home on time. The bucket came up and rounded the edge. It was full to the top. The water did not move. The water held 3 shapes inside it, like leaves pressed under glass. Not leaves. 3 little question marks arranged in a square. Then 3 more. Then 3 more. I stepped back. The bucket stood on the stone. It had decided to stand. It did not need help from a hand. I remembered the last rule. If a bucket rises heavy and silent, send it back. I put my hand on the bowline, and the rope was cold, the way iron is cold at dawn, in a month with no color. I pushed the bucket, and it did not go. I pushed again, and the rope lifted in a slow, polite curve. The bucket slid off the lip and went down into the dark without splashing, and without saying a word. I stood with my hand on the drum until the rope stopped moving, and the air from the well stopped touching my palm. Then I set the iron lid with 1 ring, and then the other. It bit the stone and took hold like a door that knows its work. When I turned to go, I saw a child at the corner by the altar. He had chalk on his hands. He had dust on his knees. He looked at me and lifted his palm the way boys do when they are not sure if they are in trouble yet. There were 3 chalk lines across his fingers. He had been counting rope with his skin. "Go home," I said. My voice came quiet, and the quiet held like a pan on a hook. The boy went. He did not run. He did not look back. I went home and found the 3rd cup on the table empty. There was a ring on the wood beneath it. The ring was a wreath made with cold. I put my finger to the ring, the way a person puts a finger to the pulse of a child while it sleeps. It beat once. It did not beat again. When the sun rose, the creek did not run. The pump coughed and made a little sound and swallowed it. The alder stood with no hand. We went to the square and took off the lid and tied the rope and said the rules and lowered the bucket. When it rose, we did not drink at the well. We did not show the water our faces. We carried our jars to tables and put 1 cup in the corner and set a hand beside it without touching the cup. In Ashwood, we learned to breathe with water in our mouths. We learned to dream without remembering and to wake with rings on our tables shaped like wreaths in cold months. We learned that rules keep their own birthdays and send you cards without asking. The drought held. The well held. We held our breath and counted by 3s without knowing why. And on the 7th morning, when the rope rose slow and the bucket stood by itself on the stone, the water inside showed me a face that was not mine and not my mother's and not any person from Ashwood. It was a face that moved wrong under the skin, like a hand under cloth. It looked at me and I felt my tongue want to say a name I did not have. I put both hands on the bowline and sent it back. The bucket went down polite as a guest who has learned to take a hint. From the dark came a small breath, like a person laughing without sound in a bed with the blanket over their mouth. I tied the rope to the cleat and wiped the chalk on my shirt and tasted stone when my teeth came together. The well had seen me. I had not shown it my face. It had learned it anyway. I went to the church and to the porch where the iron plate lay warm from the morning light. I put my thumb in the letters and read them with my eyes shut. Then I took the nail and the hammer and I scratched a fourth line below the three the alderwoman had made. Do not drink before the water asks your name. If it asks, lie. The nail left a crooked sentence. Crooked sentences travel better in a town where drought has taught people to carry their own cups to bed. I blew the dust away, and the iron tasted it, and kept it like sugar. When I turned back toward the square, the boy with chalk on his hands was there again. He had brought his own small bucket with a string tied wrong. He did not reach for the rope. He did not look into the circle. He looked at my face for a long time as if he were reading a card pinned under the skin. Will it rain? He said. Yes, I said. I did not know. But the well was listening, and the sky was listening, and the creek bed had turned its face to the sun like a line of old mouths waiting to be fed. Sometimes the only way to keep a town standing is to lie to the water and tell the truth to the people who drink it. The boy nodded and went to tell his mother. I went to tell the alderwoman that the fourth line was there if a person needed it. We both looked at the iron plate together without saying the name of the thing we were trying not to invite to supper. Ashwood held another day. The mill wheel clicked once in the heat. The pump coughed in its sleep. The iron lid shone dull. When the sun went down, the well breathed out, and the breath went through the square, and the alleys, and the kitchens, and the beds. It smelled like paper, and stone, and night. We slept, and did not dream. The rings on our tables stayed cold, through the dark. And under the iron a rope, moved by itself a hand's width, and then stopped. Like a clerk setting down a pen to sharpen it before writing the next line. Chapter 2. The Water That Remembers Faces. The drought held its breath another week. The creek stayed bone. The pump spoke in coughs, and then forgot how. We drew from the well at sunrise, and at dusk, and never at noon, because noon felt like a dare. We kept the iron plate on the rim, where the water could see our rules without seeing us. People touched the letters with their thumbs before they took a turn at the windlass. Old habits, new fear. Rusk ran the lowering. The alderwoman ran the speaking. I ran the counting that no one was supposed to do out loud. 3 turns to the first cold. 9 to the rope shake. 40 arms to water. I said the numbers in my jaw, where the bone holds words for later and does not let them out. The boy with the chalk watched and learned my mouth. He made the shapes with his own mouth and did not make sound. After, he went to the creek bed and laid 3 lines of pebbles, the way a person lays bread in rows on a cloth. We drank as the rules allow. Backs to the circle. No faces shown. 1 cup for the old, 1 for the sick, 1 for the corner. The corner cup made a ring on every table. The ring stayed cold through the hottest part of the day. Some people put their fingers in it when they passed, as if the ring were a bowl for luck. The first face showed at Marta Krenz. She poured from a jar into her wash basin to cool her hands, and saw her sister, who died in winter 5 years ago. Not a trick of light. Not grief. The water knew the sister's scar by the left eye, where a bucket rope had snapped. The water knew the way she kept her teeth together even when she laughed. The water showed Marta how her sister would look if she were alive in heat like this. Younger in the cheeks, angry in the mouth. Marta's boy called from the yard, and the face turned its head. It looked toward the door with the wrong kind of interest. Marta tipped the basin into the yard before the face could turn back and see her. The dirt drank fast and left no stain. By noon, we had 3 more stories. A man saw his father's cap float upside down in his cup, and held the cup so long his hand numbed. A girl saw a river she had never crossed and knew its bend by smell. A pair of twins saw each other's faces swap when the ladle passed between them and did not swap back until dusk. We added a fifth line to the iron with slow hands. Do not look for the lost in water. If they come, send them to ground. Rusk shook his head at that. He does not like adding rules quick. Quick rules slide. But he hammered the letters anyway because the town wanted a sound that was not thirst. The ridge man with the marked bucket came back. He said he had brought payment for our kindness. He held up a sack that clinked coins. He said, "Good silver." He smiled with 4 teeth and showed his palms the way men show empty hands before they take something. "We do not sell water," the older woman said. He said, "Of course not," and that he would never shame us with such a trade. He said the silver was for rope, and for oil, and for the wear on a good windlass. He said he would take only 1 bucket, and show no face to the well. He said he would drink away from the circle. He said he would bless our children in his heart. Rusk took the sack, and weighed it, and put it back in the man's hand. "Keep your metal," he said. "Keep your heart too." The ridge man was not used to a town that did not bend when a sack talked. He set his marked bucket on the stone and tied his wrong knot again. He said he would lower it himself if we did not want the work. Rusk lifted the bucket off the rim and placed it behind him on the square. He set the town bucket on the rim again, the way you set a chair where you mean to sit. He nodded to me and I nodded to the boy, and the boy nodded to the alder woman and she nodded to the iron plate, and we said the rules and sent the bucket down. The ridge man stood with his hands in his pockets and looked everywhere except where the water was. He whistled without tune. He spat into the dust and smiled at it. He did not look at the rope, but he counted it with his heel against the drum. When the bucket rose, he stepped forward. He did not touch the handle. He leaned a little and let his eye catch a piece of the surface. The water answered him for that. It reached up and took his reflection and held it the way a mother holds a child who is trying to leave before the coat is buttoned. It kept that piece of him and gave him a different one back. His eye came up wrong. Not blind, not glass. Different. It looked like a night pond with bugs skimming the top. He jerked back and laughed and said, "A man's body is full of surprises when he stands under the sun." He turned and walked away smooth and careful, and did not look at anyone with that new eye until he reached the edge of the square. Then he glanced at the iron lid leaning against the alder, and the lid showed him a slice of himself, and he smiled at what he saw there in private. He did not return the next day. His marked bucket did. We found it by the windlass, with a rope tied better than he knew how to tie. The rope was wet where no one had lifted it. There were 4 little question marks in chalk across the handle and 3 small rings, dried on the staves as if 3 mouths had rested there in turn. That afternoon, the water began to talk. It did not use words. It used mouth shapes in jars. It made breath lines on glass. It asked for names by leaning toward the tongue. It asked for stories by resting cold under the ear and counting heartbeats. Old Lysa poured a cup for her husband and felt the sound of a question push against the roof of her mouth. She lied and said girl, not the name on her christening paper, not the name her husband used at night, not the name her mother said when she was in trouble. Girl, a name that belongs to anyone and no one. The water sat back and considered. Then it drank one of her memories and did not ask again. She forgot the face of a woman she had once hated. She felt the relief first, and then the loss, because hate had been furniture in that room of her mind, and now the room had an echo. We scratched a 6th line on the iron. If it asks your name, lie. If it takes a memory, let it be small. By evening, the lies were not enough. The water wanted more. It began to leave letters where rings dried. Not full letters. The idea of letters. S and O, and a hook. That could be J, or could be something older. The hooks repeated on tables and on ledges and on the wood around our doors where people set jars to cool. Children traced them with fingers and tasted chalk. Mothers slapped hands away and tasted chalk themselves while telling children not to. Men scraped the marks with knives and made little piles of coal dust beside plates. The boy with the chalk came to me behind the mill at dusk. He had pebbles in his pockets and white on his chin. He said the water had learned his count. He said it pulsed the rope at the numbers he liked best. He said he had felt a tug at 12 like a hand, taking his hand and pulling him toward the mouth. "Do not count out loud," I said. "I didn't," he said. He opened his mouth and showed me his tongue. There were 3 white lines there, as if chalk had written while he slept. He closed his mouth and the lines were still there when he spoke again. "The rope counts me." We added another line. "Do not count for the well. Do not let it count you." The older woman said we were building a fence word by word. She said fences are only good until the animal learns the hinge. She said we should plan for hinges. That night I woke to my name, not from the square, from the jar on our shelf. It said my name, with the sound a spoon makes when it touches glass by accident. It said my name with the sigh a rope gives when it leaves a wet lip. It said my name by pulling the air in the room toward its mouth. It was not loud. It did not need to be. My mother's breathing did not change. She was asleep with her hand near the 3rd cup. Her fingers had left prints in the ring of cold, 4 little question marks, a hand's width apart. I stood in the kitchen and looked at the jar without looking into it. The surface showed light, the way stone shows it. Flat, not greedy, patient. "What is my name?" I said. The jar did not answer. It waited. It wanted me to tell it how to fit its rope around my mouth. I remembered the crooked line on the iron. "Do not drink before the water asks your name. If it asks, lie." I told it the name my father used when I carried the coil that was too big. I told it boy. I said it twice to make the lie honest. I said it soft so the lie would feel at home. The jar cooled. It leaned back on its own weight. Then it reached for a memory with a hand made of cold and pulled. I saw a room I had never stood in. Low ceiling. Walls black with smoke. A rope hung by the door with a knot tied low for a child. Water on the table in a blue cup. A woman at the stove with a braid as thick as my wrist. She turned and her eyes were not mine, and her mouth was not my mother's, and her breath said a word I do not know, but I knew what it meant. Food. Come. The memory slid out of me, the way a cloth slips from a nail when a breeze opens a window. I reached to catch it, and my hand closed on air. The jar warmed. The kitchen went back to being my kitchen. The ring on the table brightened, and then faded. I put my tongue to my teeth and tasted the word the woman had breathed. It tasted like clay. It sat heavy. The next morning people began to cough up small things. Not coins, not pins. Stuff like a river might carry if it moved slow and kind. A seed coat. A blue bead with a crack. A triangle of glass that might have been a bottle in a different town. A little brass bell without a tongue. They did not choke. The things rose easy, as if they had been swallowed years ago by someone else and had been waiting to ride out. We put them in a bowl by the altar and did not touch them with bare hands. The bowl made a ring on the stone, even in heat. By noon, the well spoke a different way. It sent a bucket up with water that made sound, not splash, not glug. Words, little words in wrong order. A child's first sentences. Mine, thirst. Remember, send back. Rusk did not shake. He set his palm on the bowline and nodded like a man holding a horse that has decided to dance while it waits for grain. He said send it back, and we did. The bucket went down heavy and silent, and we let the rope burn our hands so we would not grab in fear. We added this to the iron. If water speaks, answer with work, answer with rope, answer with down. That night Marta Kren's boy spoke in his sleep. He spoke the river name none of us knew. He spoke it with fondness. He spoke it again in the morning with grief, and asked for bread from a village 3 days away, where he had never been, and where the drought had not yet knocked on the door. The older woman said we would need watchers at the well, and watchers at the creek bed, and watchers at every place where water could put a face. We chose names and built a ladder of ours and tied bells to sleeves. The first watcher lost himself at dawn. He leaned too near. He did not show his face. He only listened where the rope rubs would. He said he heard someone counting under the windlass. He said he would count along to see if the rhythm could be broken. He said 3 aloud, and then he forgot how to say 2. He can say other numbers. He cannot find 2. He points between 1 and 3, and his finger shakes. We added a rule with hands that did not want to. Do not mend the well's count. If it counts wrong, let it. On the 9th morning, the water asked my name again. It waited in the jar like a mouth held in a hand. It waited in the corner cup like a child waiting under a table for a joke that has been promised. I lied better. I used a name I have only inside. The one I call myself when the coil is too heavy, and I do not want anyone to hear the noise I make when I put it down. The water accepted that name with respect. It reached again. It took a memory I had not earned. A winter on a road with snow packed flat by hoofs. A man beside me whose laugh was a kind of prayer. A dog with one ear and a bad foot. I felt the weight of the dog on my lap. I smelled the leather of the man's glove. Then the memory was gone and left a thumbprint under my ribs where it had pressed. I coughed, and a pebble fell onto my palm, white, smooth, worn by water to a shape that wanted pockets. On it, a mark, not a letter, a little question mark with a shadow. I took it to the alderwoman. She put it in the bowl with the others, and the bowl rang once, without voice, the way a bell rings after a storm in a church with no roof. That evening, the ridgeman's marked bucket came up again without rope. It climbed by itself. It set itself on the rim with care, and let the water look at the iron plate, and look at the rules, and look at us with no face to look back from. The water inside showed a face now. The knew I wrong. The mouth smiling with 4 teeth that were not where teeth want to be. Send it back, Rusk said. We did. We needed 3 men to push that time. The rope did not help. The rope had opinions. It wanted to stay where it was. At last the bucket slid off and went down like a guest who had decided to forgive us in public and punish us in private. The boy with chalk watched with his hands in his pockets and his mouth flat. He put 1 pebble on the rim where the bucket had stood, then 2 beside it, then none. He looked at me and did not smile. Do you dream? He said. No, I said. Me neither, he said. He paused. Do you remember dreaming? I said yes, and the yes felt like a lie. The yes tasted like chalk. On the 10th day, the mill wheel turned once and did not click. The creek bed breathed dust. Clouds rose on the far ridge and went another way. We lifted the lid. We sent the bucket. We said the rules. The water came like a guest who knows the way from kitchen to table without being told. When the jar cooled my hand at noon, I put my ear to the glass because I am not brave, and I am not patient, but I am good at choosing which kind of trouble I can carry. The water was singing, not a tune, a list. It sang a row of names that were not ours. It sang a row of places that smelled like clay and horses. It sang a word I had never learned, and I knew it meant ledger. It sang a number that was not a number, and I knew it meant more. I pulled my head back and wrote on the inside of my skull with a stubborn chalk that does not wash. This is not a well. This is a book that drinks. I went to the square and put my hand on the iron plate and felt the letters push back like teeth. I told the alderwoman we would need to stop treating this as thirst and start treating it as math. She nodded and said we would need to find where the water keeps its page. Rusk looked into the dark without showing it his face and said he could feel a current under the first cold. He said the bucket swings to the left when the wind is still. He said the rope jumps at 12, whether you count or not. We added 1 more line. If the bucket moves by itself, mark the air. Where it leans is where it wants you. The boy with chalk went to the creek bed and marked air. He made a square around the mill wheel with lines of dust and tiny stones set at corners like little gods. He sat in the middle with his back to the sun and waited to see where the air would cut the square first. That night, the water spoke again and used a voice I know. Not my mother's, not my own, the ridgeman's. It said my name the way he had said water. His voice dragged at the end of the word. I lied to it and told it boy, and it laughed without sound and said that name was only good the first time, and did I want to spend another? It asked, with cold under my ear, and with breath on my hand, and with a seed coat on my tongue. I put my palm on the ring it had left on the table, and felt a pulse that did not belong to any heart in our house. I thought about later, and did not use the word. I thought about rope, and used that word instead. I said rope out loud in the kitchen at midnight, with the jar breathing like a patient animal, and the corner cup waiting like a door. The water went still the way men go still when they decide they will not show you what they are thinking yet. It let the ring cool. It let my mouth forget the taste of river clay. It let the night lie down again. We slept a while. We rose before dawn. We tied the rope. We said the rules with lips that were learning new shapes. We watched the bucket swing left when there was no breeze. And under all of that, I felt a page turn. Not paper, water. A page that weighs what a town weighs when it drinks, and forgets, and drinks again. The drought held. The well held. We held a little less of ourselves each day, and set the difference in a bowl by the alder tree, where coins and seed coats and blue beads and little bells made a bright stillness that even heat could not touch. The 12th morning began with a sound inside the windlass. Not a creak, a click. Like a clerk putting a mark next to a line because the line has been paid. Whatever ledger lives in water had noticed us. It was writing in return. I told the alderwoman. She put the nail and hammer in my hand. Write faster, she said. We took the iron plate to the shade and held it steady on our knees. We turned it over and began a fresh side. The first words were simple and ugly, so they would travel. We owe nothing. We pay nothing. We send back what rises heavy and silent. We keep what rings. The plate kept our lines. The well breathed and read. The rope leaned left again. The boy with chalk-marked air. And before the sun had cleared the ridge, the water sent a face to the surface that smiled with 4 teeth, and then another face behind it that moved wrong under the skin like a hand under cloth, and both faces mouthed the same quiet question at once. Name. I bent my head and lied like a craftsman. I chose a name that belonged to a fear I had already paid. I said it soft. I said it twice. The bucket rocked. The windlass clicked. The jar in my house made a ring I would learn to read like weather. Water remembers faces. Water remembers names. Water keeps pages where stone keeps bones. Ashwood would learn that in full, but not that day. That day we sent it back. And the dark laughed without sound, from a long way down, as if a clerk had promised himself another hour at the desk, and found the chair fit him too well to leave. Chapter 3. The Ledger of Thirst. The 13th day came with no cloud and no wind. The square was already hot before dawn. The iron plate burned my palm when I touched it, though the dark under the lid breathed cool as ever. We lowered the bucket slower than before, every turn measured by Rusk's hand on the drum. The rope hissed as chalk rubbed away. When it reached the first cold, the boy muttered 12 under his breath. I glared at him. He bit his tongue and bled a little, but his lips smiled anyway. The well had taught him something he liked too much. When the bucket rose, it carried not only water, it carried weight. Not heavy, not silent, different. The rope pulsed like a throat. When the rim cleared, we saw it. Shapes resting on the surface, floating without sinking. Pale scraps like skin, shaved thin. Not paper, not bark, something softer. Marta Kren leaned close before we could stop her. She gasped and stepped back. Her own handwriting stared at her. She had written a shopping list that morning on a scrap of old ledger. Flour, salt, a pinch of pepper, if the merchant had it. The well had copied it. The words curled on the water like ink that refused to dry. We tipped the bucket back at once, but some of the water slopped onto the stone. The letters crawled across the flag like beetles. They spelled nothing whole. They broke into fragments and dried white, leaving the stone pitted like teeth. We added a line to the iron. If water writes, burn the stone. That day we built fires in the square. We carried torches and ash. We blackened every patch where the water had left words. The older woman said fire eats ink. Better to scorch our feet than let the ledger have them. By evening, more people had stories. The baker's wife poured water into her mixing bowl and saw debts written there. Debts her husband owed from dice played 20 years ago. The smith drank and spat out a mouthful of iron filings, each one stamped with numbers he had never learned. Old Lysa wept when she washed her hands and saw her dead daughter's name float up in suds. The water was not only showing faces now, it was keeping accounts. It was writing ledgers of thirst. Every drink was an entry, every sip a line, and none of us knew who it meant to balance against. The ridge man came back at dusk, not with his marked bucket, with his eye, the wrong one. It shone faint in the lantern light. He stood in the square while others fetched jars. He smiled and said nothing. When Rusk moved to send the bucket down, the ridge man stepped close and touched the rope with 2 fingers. The rope pulsed like it knew him. He whispered a number, not 3, not 12. A number none of us knew. The rope quivered. The bucket jerked, and the water below laughed. We heard it. A low ripple like a throat chuckling under stone. Back, the older woman hissed. Rusk shoved the ridge man hard. He stumbled, teeth flashing. His laugh was the same as the water's. We did not let him touch the rope again. We poured the bucket down before it reached the rim. We set the iron lid with both rings. We nailed it shut for the night. But in the morning, the nails lay on the stone, straight, untouched by hammer. The lid was closed, but not by us. It hummed faint, a sound in iron like bees locked under glass. We opened it anyway. We had no choice. The creek stayed dry. The pump breathed dust. We lowered the bucket. We said the rules. We prayed to the iron. When the bucket rose, it carried water, thick with letters. Not one hand, many. Every word written by every person in Ashwood, copied and set afloat. Petitions, names, lists, curses. The water had taken our writing and fed it back to us. The older woman struck the bucket with a torch. The water hissed. The words curled to ash. The bucket blackened. We added another line. If it shows you yourself, burn it twice. That night, the boy with chalk woke screaming. He said the rope had come through his window. He said it had touched his tongue. We checked his mouth. There were marks on it, not chalk. Letters, ugly ones, crooked, written in spit. We washed him with pump water, though it gave only dust. The letters faded but did not vanish. He slept, breathing shallow. His hands twitched, as if pulling rope in his dreams. I sat beside him until dawn. At first light, I went to the square. The iron plate was warm. I set my thumb on the crooked line I had written weeks before. Do not drink before the water asks your name. If it asks, lie. The plate pushed back, hard. It was not iron anymore. It was ledger. It was keeping score, and it wanted balance. That day, when we lifted the bucket, the water inside was not flat. It was tiered, layered, like pages, stacked but not pressed. Each ripple showed a face. Each face mouthed a number. Each number was different. All of them wanted paying. We sent it back. We said the rules. We burned the stone. But the thirst in our mouths told us the truth. The ledger of the well had opened. It had written our names, and every drink from now on would be a debt we could not refuse. Chapter 4. The Children Who Spoke in Rivers. By the 14th day, Ashwood no longer whispered. Children cried in the square, dogs barked at shadows, and grown men shouted simple greetings across fences, just to prove their throats still belonged to them. Noise was the only way to remind ourselves we were not yet inside the ledger's pages. But the well had grown clever. It learned to ask in ways we did not expect. The first to change was Marta Kren's boy, the one who had seen his dead aunt in the wash basin. He was 8. He had chalk under his nails and a habit of counting pebbles in the dust. That morning, he opened his mouth to ask for bread, and another voice came out. Not his own, not a child's. A man's voice, rough and wet, with an accent none of us knew. The words were broken like a river over stones. Cold road, carry me. Marta slapped her hand over his mouth. The voice kept speaking through her fingers, muffled but steady. When she pulled away, the boy was crying, but the tears ran wrong. They were clear at first, then brown, like river silt. The alderwoman forced Marta to bring him to the square. We gathered round and listened as the child spoke a river none of us had seen. He named bridges by stone. He called trees by color. He said the names of drowned men and laughed with their laughter. By noon, he wasn't the only one. 2 girls by the mill ran through the street with hair dripping, though no water had touched them. They sang a song in a language older than the town. When their mothers pulled them close, the song poured from their bellies instead, the notes vibrating like the drone of bees. The blacksmith's twins fought in the yard, as they always did, but when they screamed, the sound was not pennant, was the rushing of rapids, water slapping stone. We knew then the ledger had found cheaper mouths. Children, easy to write in, easy to erase. We tried to cure it. We scrubbed them with ash. We burned the clothes they had worn when the voices began. We held them over smoke and made them breathe fennel until they coughed. Nothing worked. At dusk, they gathered by the well without being called. They sat in a circle, hands folded, mouths moving in time with the rope's sway. Not speaking, not singing, counting, 1, 3, 12, 12, 12. The rope pulsed with their rhythm. The windless teeth clicked, though no one touched them. The bucket rose half a span, then dropped. It was learning to climb without hands. Rusk swore and slammed the lid down. The iron rang like a bell. The children stopped in unison, heads jerking like puppets cut from string. They fell asleep right there on the stone. Their parents carried them home, limp, breathing, but wrong. Their mouths opened and closed all night, speaking water in their dreams. We added another line to the iron. Do not let children near the circle. If they speak rivers, bind their mouths with cloth. It was cruel work. Mothers tied their daughters' faces at dusk. Fathers knotted cloths tight enough to leave bruises. The children cried, but the sound of their tears was still water, and we could not risk it. By morning, most were silent again, but some whispered through the cloth, and the words soaked straight through, like dye. The ridge man came back on the 15th day, not with his bucket, not with his teeth, but with the children at his heels. Half a dozen, chalk on their fingers, dust on their tongues. He led them to the square and untied their cloths. They opened their mouths, and the river poured out, a chorus of voices speaking as one. Not children's voices, not Ashwood's, a drowned multitude. It echoed off stone and timber. It rattled glass. It set the iron plate to humming. The ridge man smiled with his wrong eye. Ledger keeps ledger, he said. Balance keeps balance. Your water is not yours. Rusk raised the town bucket like a cudgel. The older woman shouted for us to bind the children, drag them back. But I was watching the rope. It had begun to move again. The bucket rose heavy, silent, and the children spoke louder, their small throats wide, their eyes rolling white. I remembered the crooked line I had written. Do not drink before the water asks your name. If it asks, lie. So I shouted a lie into the square, a name that was not mine, not anyone's. A name ugly enough to sound true. The water heard. The bucket shuddered. The children coughed, choked, spat silt onto the stones. Their mouths closed. The rope stilled, but the ridgeman only smiled. Ledger heard, he said. Ledger waits. One day you'll drink what you've promised. He left with no bucket, no water, only laughter that stuck to the stones like moss. That night, Marta's boy died in his sleep. No water in his lungs. No fever, His chest simply stopped moving, as if the river he carried had run dry. When we washed him for burial, a pebble rolled out of his mouth, white, smooth. A question mark scratched into one side. We put it in the bowl with the rest. The bowl was almost full now. It hummed when the wind touched it. It hummed louder when children passed. We added another line, hands shaking as we struck it into iron. If children speak rivers, they belong to the bowl. The alderwoman cried as she wrote it, but she did not stop her hand. Ashwood could not stop now. The ledger of thirst had our names, our faces, our children, and it would keep writing until the last line was balanced. Chapter 5. The Flood in the Veins. The 16th day of the drought broke Ashwood's patience. We were drinking ledger water by the jar now, and though we tried to lie, though we burned every word it wrote, the well was learning us too fast. The iron plate was thick with rules, scratched front and back until no space remained. The alderwoman said iron could only hold so much. When metal forgets, it bends. When it bends, it breaks. And when it breaks, nothing remembers what you meant. We gathered in the square at dawn. The sun was red, too low, as if it had dragged itself from sleep unwilling. The boy with chalk had not woken from his dreams. He twitched in his bed, mouth wet with water that was not there. His mother sat with him, eyes hollow. The older woman told her to bind his jaw with cloth. She said she could not bind her own child. She said if he spoke rivers, then rivers he must be. She said this with a face empty of choice. Rusk lowered the bucket. When it rose, the water inside was thick, not clear, not flat. It clung to the wood like oil. We leaned back, but some spilled. It touched his arm. Rusk hissed. He tore at his sleeve, but the water had already gone in, not down his throat, not through his skin. It moved along his veins like ink taking a path it had always known. Blue spread under his flesh, pulsing with his heartbeat. The alderwoman held him, but he shoved her away. He stood, jaw clenched, and his eyes filled with the shine of riverstone. We tried to wash it out. We doused him with pump dust, threw salt, pressed ash into his skin. Nothing stopped the flow. It climbed his arm, shoulder, neck. By noon, his voice was gone. When he opened his mouth, water gurgled, and his tongue flicked like a fish gasping for air. He should have drowned. Instead, he lived, but not as Rusk. He carried water in his veins. When he walked, you could hear it, a rush like creek stones under flood. When he sat, his breath whistled, the sound of eddies turning in narrow gaps. His wife tied him to a post in their yard. He sat there 3 days, staring, humming with water. On the 4th night, he slipped his ropes without effort and went to the square. The bucket was already waiting. The rope swayed as if it knew he was coming. He set his hands on the rim and bent close, not showing his face giving it. He opened his mouth. The water inside him answered the water below. It poured from his lips, a steady stream that struck the rope, climbed it, filled the bucket, without need of lowering. The town watched in silence as the bucket brined with Rusk. Not flesh, not blood. Rusk turned to us once. His eye glowed river blue. He smiled with no teeth, and then his body crumpled dry, an empty sack. The water took the rest. We burned what was left. It smelled of fish and ink. We added a rule, though no one wanted to carve it. If the well takes a man inside, burn his husk. Do not bury him. The older woman struck the iron herself, tears falling as she hammered. Her hand shook, but she did not miss the line. She said iron bends, but it still remembers the sound of truth when it is forced into it. That night, Marta's boy's grave grew wet. His stones seeped cold rings, each one wider than the last, as if water breathed beneath. We poured ash around it, but the circles kept spreading. By dawn, half the yard was damp. The ledger was filling veins beneath the earth as easily as veins in the living. On the 17th day, 3 men collapsed in the square. They coughed river silt. When we pulled their shirts open, their veins shone blue. The well had reached them too, though they swore they had not drunk. It came through the air, through the skin, through the smallest breath. No one was safe. No rule could keep it out. We met in the older woman's house. We spoke loud, to keep our words ours. We argued. Some said we should seal the well with stone and fire. Let the drought kill us before ledger water could. Others said we should give ourselves to it, fully drink deep. Let it write, maybe survive in its book. A third said there must be another ledger, a greater balance, hidden below. That if we found it, if we pulled it up, we might bargain. I remembered the crooked rules. I remembered the boy with chalk. I remembered the rope leaning left when there was no wind. The well was pointing. It wanted us to follow. I said this aloud. The older woman nodded. Her voice was tired, but steady. If we are already being written, then let us at least read what is being written of us. So we chose 7. 7 to go down. 7 to climb the rope with buckets, not to drink, but to search. I was among them. The boy with chalk came too, though no one asked him. He followed me with his pockets heavy and his eyes bright. The ridgeman stood at the edge of the square, smiling with his wrong eye. He did not stop us. He only said, "Ledger is ledger. Ink cannot choose not to dry." We tied ourselves to the rope. We said the rules. We lit torches, and for the first time in Ashwood's memory, we climbed down into the mouth of the well. The dark closed around us, damp and waiting. Water licked the stone like a tongue on teeth. The rope pulsed under our hands, steady, eager, pulling us lower. Not 40 arms, not even 60. The well was deeper than rules had said. It was not a well, it was a throat, and every vein in my body thrummed with its song, a current moving faster than blood. The flood had entered me too, not yet enough to drown, but enough to promise. Soon. Chapter 6. The Town That Forgot Fire. We carried torches when we went down, though we knew fire and water were enemies. The older woman said light was more important than safety, and that a flame held at arm's length was still a prayer. But prayers do not last long in the throat of a well. The stone swallowed the light quick. What burned bright in the square burned dull in the dark. Our torches smoked. The air thickened. Our lungs filled with damp. We pressed cloths to our mouths, but still the smoke turned strange. It smelled not of pitch and pine, but of drowned wood, rot pulled from river bottoms. At 40 arms, the rope should have touched water. It did not. We kept climbing. 50 arms, 60, still stone, still dark, still the rope pulsing faint in our palms, like a living vein. At 70 arms, the torches flickered once, then died. Not burned out, snuffed. The fire was gone, as if someone had blown through the dark from below. Our sticks smoked, faint, then nothing. We hung blind. 7 hearts beating fast enough to hear. 7 breaths pushing cloths against teeth. Light another, someone whispered. But when we struck steel, no spark caught. The air itself had turned. Fire could not live here. The town had not sent us into stone. It had sent us into ledger, and the ledger had rules. We climbed lower, torches useless in our hands. The rope was our guide. It shifted sometimes, leaning left, leaning right. We followed. Below, a faint glow grew. Not fire, water light, the kind that shines in deep caves where no sun has gone, green and wrong. It painted the stone wet, showed carvings where hands had been, not ours, older. Symbols spiraled along the wall, circles within circles, hooks, question marks, rows of 3s. Every mark the water had left on our tables, etched here deep, perfect, endless. The boy with chalk reached out, traced one with his finger. The mark glowed under his touch. He smiled, teeth white in the green. He said, "It knows me." I pulled him back before the stone could take more. At last, after near 90 arms, the rope ended in a ledge. We pulled ourselves onto it, 7 bodies wet with sweat, lungs tight with air that tasted like iron and moss. The ledge opened into a cavern. The light came from pools, dozens of them, each shallow, each glowing faint from within, water still as glass. In every pool, faces. Not one face, many. Dozens stacked, layered, staring upward through the film of water. Eyes open, mouths moving slow. No sound reached us, but our bones hummed. The boy with chalk dropped his pebbles. They rolled toward one pool. It rippled once, as if greeting him. We knelt, we looked. We should not have. The alder woman said the rule again. Do not show the water your face. But the pools showed us anyway. Each reflected not our now, but our debts. The smith saw every piece of iron he had hammered unpaid for. The baker's wife saw every crumb she had stolen for her children. I saw every lie I had ever told the well, stacked neat, waiting to be collected. We staggered back. The pools quivered. They had written us too well. The water knew our balances, and balances must be paid. The boy with chalk laughed. He said, "It's not a well, it's a ledger book. Each face, each name entries." He stepped forward and pressed his palm into the nearest pool. The water climbed his skin, bright, alive. He screamed once, not in pain, but in awe. His veins lit blue, pulsing fast. The water filled him the way it had filled Rusk, but deeper. When he spoke, his mouth carried a chorus. Not one voice, hundreds. "We are owed," he said. His child's throat could not hold it. The sound cracked the stone, shook dust from the ceiling. We pulled him back, but the pool held his hand. It did not burn, it did not tear. It wrote, it was writing him. We cut the rope from his wrist with a knife. He fell onto the ledge, sobbing. His hand was gone to the elbow, replaced with a current that moved without bone. He clutched it to his chest, rocking, murmuring numbers no one had taught him. The older woman whispered, "If we cannot light fire here, Ashwood will forget fire above. The ledger takes what it pleases." We tied the boy with cloth, bound his glowing arm, dragged him to the rope. We climbed. The pools hummed below. The faces watched, eyes unblinking. The glow followed us up, fading slow. When we reached the square, dawn had broken. Torches burned in the hands of townsfolk. The sight of fire made us weep, but already it felt wrong, fragile, borrowed. The flames bent sideways, as if ready to snuff at the first whisper from the well. The boy lay on the stone, his arms still glowing. He whispered numbers into the dust. 3, 9, 12, ledger numbers. His mother sobbed, but did not touch him. The older woman struck a new line into iron with trembling hands. "If the water writes in flesh, bind it. Do not let fire forget itself." That night, the hearths in Ashwood flickered, candles guttered, lanterns smoked out. When people tried to relight them, sparks died on the wick. The town had lost fire. The ledger had claimed it. Only the torches in the square burned, and only because the alder woman sat beside them, striking iron with her hammer, each blow a prayer the well had not yet taken. And the boy whispered numbers into the dark until the dark began to whisper back. Chapter 7. The Drowned Walk Ashwood. On the 18th day, Ashwood woke to footprints, not wet cold, prints frosted into the dust of the street, though no dew had fallen. Bare feet, wide as men's but too long in the toe. They led from the square to the edge of the creek bed and back again. Rusk's widow was the first to see them. She followed them with a lamp, then dropped the lamp when she saw the faces. They stood in the creek bed at dawn, half a dozen shapes, shoulders bent, hair dripping, though no water ran. Their skin was pale and slack, mouths open, eyes wide, but their eyes did not move. They stared only at the square, at the alder tree, at the iron lid. The drowned had come to town. We gathered with torches, but the flames bent sideways, weak, whispering they were not long for this world. The alder woman struck iron on stone, each blow a prayer, each spark stolen by damp air before it touched the ground. The drowned did not flinch. They shuffled forward, slow, deliberate, leaving frost strings where their feet pressed earth. Marta Kren cried out first. One of them was her boy. Not the body we buried, but a version of him written wrong. His chest rose and fell, though no breath fogged. His lips mouthed words none of us could hear. She ran to him before we could stop her. She pressed her face to his, kissed his cold mouth. He did not move. He only stared, his hands hanging like ropes in wind. When she pulled away, her lips were blue. By nightfall, her veins shone faint as Rusk's had before. We dragged her inside, bound her wrists, begged her not to drink, but it was too late. The ledger had found a new page in her veins. By noon, more drowned walked, from the ridge, from the fields, from the graves behind the church. We counted 24 before we stopped counting. They did not attack. They only came, stood in the square, waited, eyes fixed on the well, mouths open, ledger entries waiting to be read aloud. The ridge man walked among them, not drowned, not alive, something between. His wrong eye glowed faint. He raised his marked bucket high. The ledger is balanced only when we join it, he said. Drink and be written, speak and be remembered. The older woman spat, struck the iron plate with her hammer until her arm bled. We are not ink, she said. We are not paper, but her voice cracked, and fire cracked with it. The torches flickered low. The boy with chalk was tied in the alderwoman's yard, his glowing arm wrapped in wet cloth. He strained at the ropes, whispering numbers faster than we could count. 3, 9, 12, 33, 70. His mother begged us to untie him. We did not. We knew what would happen if his arm touched stone. At dusk, the drowned began to move. They spread through the town, quiet, methodical. One pressed its face to the smith's door until the wood blackened with damp. Another stood at the baker's oven until the coals hissed out cold. Candles guttered wherever they walked. Ashwood was losing fire, house by house. We lit bonfires in the square, heaping timber, oil, pitch. The flames rose high, fighting, stubborn. The drowned stopped at the edge of light. Their mouths moved faster, eyes unblinking. The ridgeman stood among them, smiling. He pointed at the flames. They'll forget you soon, he said. Fire forgets itself in the ledger. The older woman struck iron again and again. Every blow made the flames surge, every spark a heartbeat. But her arm shook, and her hammer slipped, and the fire bent low. The drowned stepped closer. Their skin cracked in the heat, but they did not stop. They wanted to be written in us, not in stone. That night, Ashwood did not sleep. We stood guard around the bonfires, torches useless, iron ringing, water humming in jars. The drowned ringed the square, silent, waiting. Children whimpered in their mothers' arms. Men gripped knives that would not hold an edge against silence. We knew we could not last. Not with fire dying, not with water riding, not with drowned walking. The boy with chalk screamed once in the night. The ropes snapped. He stood, arm glowing brighter than the flames, mouth open. Numbers poured from him, not words. Each number echoed in our bones. The drowned swayed in rhythm. The ridgeman laughed. The ledger has found its clerk, he said. We tried to grab the boy, but his skin was too hot, too cold, too wrong. He walked to the well, set his glowing hand on the iron lid. The metal hissed, softened, bent. The rules we had carved sagged like wax. One by one, the lines blurred. The iron forgot. The ledger had eaten our fence. The drowned moaned in triumph, a sound like rivers thawing in spring. The ridgeman raised his bucket. The boy with chalk lifted the lid. The dark below sighed, ready, and the fire in the square shrank to nothing. Ashwood had forgotten flame. Chapter 8. The Iron Rules. On the 19th day, Ashwood woke without flame. Not a candle, not a coal, not a spark. The hearths were cold, ovens black, torches pale. Even the alderwoman's hammer rang dull when it struck iron. The drowned still stood in the square, ringed like stones around a grave. The ridge man grinned among them, bucket swinging at his side. The boy with chalk crouched at the well, one hand glowing, the other scrawling numbers on the stone. Every mark pulsed faint, then vanished, absorbed into the ground. He was not drawing anymore. He was transcribing. The well had found its scribe. We tried to light fires again and again. Flint struck steel, sparks leaped, but nothing caught. The tinder smoked once, then went dark. The ledger had erased fire from memory. Ashwood had forgotten flame. The alderwoman sat in the dust with her head bowed. Her lips moved without sound. For a moment I thought she had given in, that she was praying to the well instead of against it. But then she lifted her hammer, pointed it toward the church. The porch, she rasped. The old iron. We knew what she meant. The church porch had been boarded for years, its timbers warped and blackened, but beneath it lay the oldest iron in Ashwood. Bars thicker than a man's arm, set into stone before the town had a name. No one remembered why they had been buried there, only that they must not be moved. But memory is ledgered too, and sometimes the only way to fight ink is with a heavier hand. We ran while the drowned watched, their heads turning slow to follow us. They did not chase. They knew we would return. Every debt finds its way back to the desk. The church door groaned as we forced it. Inside, the air was dry, untouched by river breath. We tore up the boards, pried at the nails until our fingers bled. Beneath lay the bars, 4 lengths of iron black, with age, etched with rules no tongue could sound. Circles within hooks, marks older than Ashwood's words. The older woman touched one with her thumb. It burned, but she did not pull away. Her eyes filled with tears. "These are the first rules," she whispered. "The ones our own came from." We dragged the bars into the square, one by one, sweating, groaning, backs bent. The drowned hissed when the iron touched light. The boy with chalk stopped scribbling. His glowing hand flickered, as if unsure. The ridge man's grin faltered. "You don't know what those say," he warned. "You don't know what they cost." But the alderwoman raised her hammer high. She struck the first bar, and sparks flew, real sparks. Sparks that lived, sparks that fell to the dust and burned tiny holes before fading. Fire remembered itself. We laid the bars across the mouth of the well. 4 lines, heavy, humming, glowing faint with the marks etched deep. The boy with chalk wailed, clutching his head. The drowned staggered back a step. The ridge man hissed like water thrown on coals. "You cannot change ledger," he spat. "You cannot write in ink already dried." But the alderwoman struck the bars again and again. Each blow rang like a bell. Each strike carved sound into the air. Each spark landed on torches piled nearby, and this time they caught. Flame roared up, sudden, hungry, as if it had been waiting all along for iron's permission. Ashwood cheered, voices raw. For the first time in days, noise felt like hours again. The drowned shrieked, covering their eyes. Some fell into the dust, writhing as smoke rose from their skin. The ridge man stumbled back, bucket clattering to the ground. He clutched his wrong eye, which now wept clear water. The boy with chalk collapsed, his glowing arm sputtering like a dying torch. He sobbed numbers, slower now, fading. 3, 9, 12. We ringed the square with fire, flames fed with pitch and timber. The drowned dared not cross. They stood at the edge, swaying, moaning, but they did not advance. For the first time, they feared us. We struck a new line into the iron plate, this one copied from the ancient bars. We did not understand its shapes, but we traced them with nails, hammered them into the softer plate until the grooves smoked. The elder woman said, "Rules do not need understanding. They need obedience." The fire roared higher. The drowned fell back another step. The ridge man shouted curses, but his voice cracked, his bucket empty. We drove them to the edge of the square, pressed them back with flame. They did not leave, but they stopped, waiting. Ledger entries paused, not erased. That night we kept fire burning. Every man, woman, and child carried torches. We sang not songs, but shouts, rough and ugly. We hammered the bars again and again, until sparks rained like stars. The boy with chalk lay bound, fevered, whispering still, but his glow dimmed. The ledger had lost its clerk. For the first time since the drought began, Ashwood slept with fire beside us, and in the morning, the drowned were gone. But the well still breathed, the rope swayed, the ledger waited. Rules had bought us time, not freedom. Chapter 9. The Rope That Pulled Back. The 20th dawn came dry as bone. No cloud, no creek, no pump cough. The square smelled of smoke from the fires we had kept burning all night. Ashwood had survived another turn of the sun, but the well had not forgotten. The rope moved before any hand touched it. It coiled and uncoiled like a serpent testing its length. It slapped against the windless teeth, clacking in rhythm. The boy with chalk whimpered where he lay bound. His glowing arms sputtered, then brightened, then dimmed again, like a dying star. "Ledger," he croaked. "Ledger is hungry." We gathered around the iron bars laid across the mouth. They still smoked faint from where the alderwoman's hammer had struck them, but now the rope wrapped between the bars, tugging, pulling. It wanted us. It wanted more than faces, more than veins, more than drowned flesh. It wanted bodies whole. The ridgeman stood at the far edge of the square, eye weeping clear water, bucket swinging empty. He pointed at us and laughed. "You fed it too long," he shouted. "Now it comes for the debt itself. It does not wait to be lowered. It climbs." The rope jerked. The windlass spun. The iron teeth screamed. We leaped back as the bucket shot upward, higher than the bars, higher than the rim. It hung in the air a moment, dripping, heavy. Then it tipped. Not water. Hands. Gray, slick, finger bones too long. They gripped the rim, pulled. A head rose. Not drowned flesh. Not a villager. Not a face we knew. A ledger face. Blank where eyes should be. Mouth full of numbers. Each tooth a digit, grinding against the next. It whispered with breath that smelled of riverbed's balance. The older woman struck the iron bars with her hammer. Sparks flew. Flame roared. The face recoiled, hissing. But the rope did not let go. It pulled harder, dragging the ledger creature higher. Its shoulders broke the surface. Its body was carved with symbols, spirals, hooks. Every mark we had seen etched in stone, now moving in flesh. The boy with chalk screamed. The marks on his glowing arm flared, answering the ones on the ledger creature. His body arched, his voice cracked. Numbers poured from his mouth. 3, 9, 12, 33, 70. The rope pulsed in time. The ledger was calling its clerk back. We tried to hold him. His mother wept, clinging. But the rope snapped out, wrapped round the boy's chest, yanked. It pulled not down, but back. The ledger was hauling its debtors into itself. We grabbed the rope, pulled with all our strength. The ledger pulled harder. Our hands bled. Our backs bent. Children screamed. The fire bent low. The ridgeman laughed until his voice cracked to silence. The older woman shouted, "Strike the bars." We did. Hammer after hammer, blow after blow, sparks filling the square. The iron hummed, deep, louder, louder, until the air itself vibrated. The rope shuddered, the ledger face shrieked, and the boy collapsed, glowing arm dimming to ash. The rope loosened, just for a breath. Enough, we heaved. The bucket fell back, crashing against the bars. The ledger face slammed into iron, screaming, mouth full of numbers that shattered like glass. It fell into the dark, dragging the rope with it. The well roared, not water. Ledger tearing itself open. Stones split. Dust rained. The windlass cracked in two. The rope snapped. The end whipped across the square, striking the alder tree, splitting bark, hissing like a snake cut in half. It writhed, then stilled, lying in the dust, twitching like a dying vein. The well was silent. The bars smoked. The boy with chalk lay still, chest rising shallow. The ridgeman was gone. Not walked, not run gone. The square empty where he had stood. The elder woman lifted her hammer one last time. She struck the bars, and sparks flew high, catching in the thatch of roofs. But this time, the fire lived. The flames roared bright. Ashwood had fire again. For now, we carved a final rule on the plate that morning. Hands shaking, voices raw. If the rope pulls back, cut it. If the ledger climbs, burn it. If it names you, lie until you cannot breathe. The plate smoked, the letters glowing faint. The well was quiet, but it had not forgotten. Ledger never forgets. Chapter 10. The Village That Carries Buckets. Ashwood did not celebrate. When the rope snapped and the ledger face fell, when the fire roared back into our hearths, when the drowned melted like frost in sun, we did not cheer. We only breathed, shallow, careful, as though air itself might be counted and tallied by the well. The square smelled of smoke and iron. The bars across the mouth of the well glowed faint, their etched marks alive in ways we did not want to name. We left them there, heavy and humming. No one touched them. The older woman said the bars were not ours anymore. They were rules in flesh of metal, too old for us to bend. To strike them again would risk breaking them, and rules that break do not mend. We buried Rusk's husk in ash, not earth. The older woman scattered his remains across the blackened mill wheel, letting the wind carry him instead of the water. We thought it kinder. We thought maybe ledger could not balance ash against river. We were wrong to think anything was safe, but hope is a habit you cannot burn away. The boy with chalk lived, but he was not the same. His glowing arm had dimmed to pale flesh, but the skin there was etched faint with spirals, hooks, and question marks too small to read. He did not speak numbers anymore. He did not speak at all. He carried a bucket everywhere, tied to his wrist with rope. He never filled it, never lowered it, never tipped it. He only carried it, empty, as though the act alone was a rule he could not break. Children copied him. Soon every child in Ashwood had a bucket tied to their wrist or belt. They carried them to school, to bed, to table. Empty buckets, knocking together like bells. It was noise, and noise was safety, but it was also obedience. The well had ridden in them deeper than we knew. The ridgeman never returned. Not his eye, not his bucket, not his grin. Some said he had been swallowed. Others said he had become ledger itself, spread thin in the water beneath. At night, if you listened near the square, you could still hear laughter echo faint under the stone. Not loud, not cruel, just steady, like a clerk amused by the page. The elder woman grew thin, her arm bent from hammering iron. She stopped speaking rules aloud, stopped striking the plate. She said the rules were written deep enough that striking them further might erase them. But when she slept, her lips still moved, mouthing each line as though reciting them to herself was the only way she could stay whole. When she died that winter, her body smelled faintly of smoke, and her tongue was blackened like coal. We buried her in iron shavings. The ground hissed when they touched her. Ashwood learned to live with what was left. We fetched water from the creek when the rains returned, but no one stopped carrying buckets. We kept the iron plate in the square, its grooves filled with ash. Children pressed their thumbs to the rules before they played. Men touched them before they bartered. Women set their jars beside it before they filled them. The plate had become our prayer, not to God, to ledger. The well itself we never sealed. The iron bars stayed across its mouth, humming, breathing. Sometimes the rope twitched, but never rose. Sometimes water sighed, but never climbed. We walked wide around it, but we did not leave. Ashwood was built here, and Ashwood stayed. That is what villages do. even when Ledger wants them gone. At night, when the wind turned, you could hear pages turning, not paper. Water, soft, steady, infinite. We told ourselves it was only the creek running again, only rain on roofs, only leaves in gutters. But deep down, each of us knew the ledger had not closed. It had only paused. Ink dries slow in a well that has no bottom. I still carry a bucket. I tie it to my wrist each dawn with rope chalked white. I set it by my bed each night, empty. I have not lowered it in years. But sometimes, when I wake before light, I find a ring of cold on the table beside it, a wreath where no water should be. I press my thumb into it, whisper the rules, and wait for it to fade. It always does. For now, Ashwood is a village that carries buckets. Children grow up with rope on their wrists. Men marry with buckets tied to their belts. Women bury their dead with buckets at their feet. We do not laugh at it. We do not question it. It is the only way we know to keep Ledger at bay. And sometimes, when the air is very still, I hear the rope moving beneath the iron bars, not climbing, not pulling, counting, patient. Ledger never forgets, and neither do we.